And exactly, we're live. Good morning to everybody. I hope you're having a blessed day. It is a wonderful, wonderful day. Let's get ourselves kicked off. It is Mindset Monday today, where we try and get everybody on the right path of thinking. Want you thinking correctly today? That's the main thing. Vernon, how are you doing, my brother? And how's your day going?
We are doing pretty well so far. Had a rushing morning, but we're doing as handsomely as we can.
And we're back. There we go. And we're back. There goes that morning greeting. So today, Vernon, and it being Mindset Monday, we always say we put aside the analytics and we try and get everyone together. Why do we have Mindset Mondays, people? Because one of the biggest problems we face as a country is culture. And the reason why we started Mindset Mondays is because we realized that we have a cultural issue as a country in terms of the fact that a lot of our outcomes are determined by our behaviors, our attitudes, our beliefs, and our character. And Mindset Monday sets to address these things. Because in as much as we want to have good economic outcomes and we can keep saying this policy, this restructuring, all that, if we have a rotten attitude as people, we will have rotten outcomes. That we cannot hide from. Okay, a rotten attitude will lead to rotten outcomes. Okay, we can always say, how come the Chinese as a country were able to eradicate poverty? Because when Chinese sit down to work, they work. That's how they do it. When they start businesses, they pass them on from generation to generation. Those are cultural things. Those are personal beliefs. Those are very powerful things that sit within them. The first president of China forced the nation to read his little red book, which had quotes from the art of war, which had quotes from Lao Tzu, strong philosophies, and he forced these people to internalize these things at gunpoint, by the way. Mao Zedong would actually bring soldiers sometimes and say, "Recite a page from the little red book," and you have to start reciting these things at gunpoint, at risk of imprisonment at some points. And some people will say, "Well, that's tough." Yes, but take a look at the generation of Chinese it's created. Hardworking, diligent. When these people start from scratch, they don't care what they have to face. Now us, soft life. Now we're already struggling with all of this as it is. So today I want to ask, I think my pulse question for today, and I'm putting it out there in the comments section for everyone to ask, for everyone to kind of go through is, are we a soft generation? Okay, not just here, but even in our country, are we a soft generation? Give us your answers. Give us answers to your questions. So I'm going to give you a quick clip which actually was circulating, and I posted it on my page. This is former basketball player Dwight Howard. This is former basketball player Dwight Howard, and he's training his son. So I'm going to say one thing first. I don't agree with this thing of filming things and throwing everything on social media. So I think on the aspect of filming his son in all of this, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm really not. I don't think it's a good idea to be filming it. But that's not the complaint. People are saying that he's too harsh on his son. He's in a session where he's training his son. Okay, he's actually taking him to training. The son is busy saying, I can't, and he's crying. And Dwight Howard is telling him to keep pushing and to keep going. So take a look at this clip, and it is apparent that he's receiving backlash as usual, because on Twitter, people on Twitter have got nothing better to do than to tell people, than to wag their fingers at people and to tell them how to parent. Half of them don't even have kids. But anyway, it's half of them don't even want to have kids. And anyway, let me share this clip of it, and we're gonna be talking about discipline today, people. We're going to be finishing the conversation on discipline, which we started last week. But take a look at this video clip.
I can't. Come on. I can't. Come on. I can't. Come on. I can't do it. No, I can't. I can't. Yes, you can. Come on. What do you want me to do? Don't worry about that. I want you to do it till I tell you to stop. What? Don't start. Let's go.
So words like child abuse are being thrown about. Okay, that this is now child abuse and so forth. And I will say, like, categorically, I will say I'm not a fan of the filming part. That part I can say yes. I think those are things that should be kept private. But here's what I will say, especially with boys, Vernon, and young men. And in fact, I'll give my views on the other side on a much more detailed part. But that was a video that it has been receiving backlash. He has been saying that is tough parenting style. So I'll ask you in the comment section, what are your thoughts? Okay. That's a father physically training his son, and he's telling him, the son is saying, Dad, I can't do it anymore. I can. He's like, yes, you can. You're gonna keep going until I tell you to stop. So and it's had comments here and there, back and forth. But I'll ask you, Vernon, before we go on break. What are your thoughts before we go on our 60 at 60 break?
I think it's good to push your children to do what they have got to do and even beyond their limits. But when you become a bit too extreme, of course, you will get a lot of words like child abuse and possibly molestation. I don't know whatever they want to contextualize it on Twitter. And just for the record, I'm also one of those people on Twitter. So, yeah, but I think, if you're doing it too much,
You're one of the finger
it becomes a
waggers.
challenge. No, I think I try to be as practical and as rational whenever I'm giving out my comments. So, yeah.
All right, so we'll be back on the other side. People, give us your comments in the comments about it. Give us your comments about it. What do you think of that? Is that tough parenting? Is it good parenting? Is it the parenting that's needed today? I'll give you my thoughts afterwards and answer the question for today: are we a soft generation? Let's get back onto this on the other side of 60 at 60.
All right, we're back at it.
Okay, so so we did get one comment on Bisalom says he does right here. He says it's a good thing. Even the Bible is clear. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up your children in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. It's true. It's Dumisani actually writes even in the Radical Entrepreneur book, and I cite it because I think people should read that. And he says it was part of his raising where there was a lot of discipline in the animal caring side of the family farm. It was part of that upbringing that gave him the discipline to be the radical entrepreneur that he is today. And he says some people may call it strict. He says, look, you'll be disciplined if you didn't do your chores, your duties, the things that you were told to do as a child. You'd be harshly disciplined. And he said, it is that thing that raised me up to know that I have to do certain things at specific times. I have to continuously do things in the right manner, with the right character. So some people will say that's child abuse, that's child labor, all sorts of things. But it's produced a guy who has got the level of productivity that I think 100 of us combined can even wish we could have. So the question is, what should we do? So Mopiri has written here and said this is an interesting topic. The school of hard knocks and reality has dealt with the soft life mindset. So let me give you my thoughts on it, Vernon. Which is where I get concerned with this whole wag the finger thing. I think as a generation we've gotten to the point where we have to have an opinion about absolutely everything, including the way people parent. But like I said, I'm not a fan of the posting part. That part I must stress. Look, people, if you're gonna discipline your kids, can you keep it off social media, please? As in, just keep that part private, because you might traumatize that kid in the fact that that video is going to circulate for a long time. That kid's going to have to go to high school where people can mock him for that. And high school is already a very treacherous place as it is. And, I know that, yes, we should be able to take some mockery and all sorts of things. But look, it's already tough as it is. Okay, high school kids already find enough to mock you about. So perhaps keep your kids off social media just so that they don't have to go through the mockery of high school. And high school kids are brutal. Okay, they haven't built that resilience yet. They're brutal to one another. I think we all remember how high school was. We just spent all day roasting each other in that rough fashion. So I think just let's keep that ammunition away. But in terms of what people are lashing out, they're saying his tough parenting. So they're lashing out against him for the tough parenting. So let's discuss the parenting style. Here's my issue that I say with a lot of people. And I'll say this to guys, okay? Guys, pay attention to this. Men, especially young men, pay attention to this. There is no sympathy for you in this world. You must recognize the only sympathy out there in this world are for women, children, and animals. That's what Chris Rock pointed out, and he was correct. Okay, people have sympathy for a stray dog that's wounded. When a man is sitting homeless on the streets, no one cares. Okay, no one cares. If a child is homeless, we care. If a woman is out there homeless, we care. If a man is homeless, he's mad. That's what we'll say. Okay, that's exactly how we'll speak, and that is how society is with men. And no matter how much sympathy game people will say, oh, we need to actually care, men must speak out. No one is going to listen to you when you speak out. That's the truth. A lot of people will say the only time, Vernon, I will tell you this, when people are sympathetic to a guy is when he attempts to or successfully commits suicide. Okay? That is when people now said, oh, what was going on? Why didn't he speak out? Please, as if when he spoke out, you would have heard. There is no sympathy, Vernon, for male failure. None. Okay? I'll tell you this. Even guys, a lot of, and I'm sorry to maybe bring out the conversations of the genders today. Women will talk out there and they'll say, oh, no, men should speak out. They need to be more vocal about their insecurities and everything. I will be very honest with you right now, Vernon. No woman will stick around with a guy who's constantly whimpering about how tough life is. They can sympathize with him as long as they don't have to date or take care of that guy. Okay, as long as they're not on the receiving end of that guy's what's it, quote unquote, weakness. I'm telling you, as long as they're not on the receiving end, you will be left. If you try and think that you can cry your way through life, you will be left. Okay, they'll all say that, oh no, we want guys who are more open and conversational, and they'll tell us the day they get into a relationship with a guy like that, they'll leave him. Okay, they will. That's the reality of life, and nobody wants to try and have that conversation. That's a reality. How many guys, and I think most guys, you know this, you've been dumped before. Enough guys have been left before, and you know that the moment you started talking like that, there was already you started being left out. So I think we all need to get to the reality that men need to prepare, and this is what I'm going to try and say is men need to prepare boys for the world they're going to enter. There's this need to protect boys, to protect kids. And I understand, protect them from grievous harm, molestation, those kind of things. Protect them, okay? Protect them from the excessive bullying, protect them. But you also have to prepare them. I would rather a father is the one pushing their child. I would rather, okay? Because Vernon, it's gonna be if it's not gonna be your father or a father figure, okay, or at least a sports coach, because a sports coach will also push you, a mentor will push you. Those are loving, that's loving pressure, okay, trying to get the best out of you. But then there's the people who will break you, okay, because in life you will face things that will break you. Job loss, you will face betrayal, you will face backstabbing, you will face divorce, you will face near death. Those things don't love you, they don't love you, okay. And there's the expectation as a man, you have to get through it. So I think one of the in as much as we want to protect children, there comes a certain point, and this is what I keep saying about, and this also, Vernon, is the part of the conversation where we also have to also remember that a lot of guys have abandoned their children. Okay, a lot of guys have abandoned their children. The good thing is there's still more men who are physically there raising their children, but a lot of guys have abandoned their children. So step one, that's a father who's actually there, by the way. Now I remember a sermon being preached at Miracle Life, and they were talking about raising children, and Pastor Haley and Pastor Walker were actually talking about the fact that they said as parents we have this tendency to love the opposite gender child a lot more and to be very protective. Mothers are very protective of their sons, fathers are very protective of their daughters. But they said the older their children got, the more they had to push that child to the parent of their gender. Because I've noticed one thing, Vernon, mothers prepare their daughters for the world they're going to walk into. Women actually prepare girls for the world they're walking into. They know how to prepare them. And it's because the expectations I've seen women put on young girls actually prepares them for the world that they're going to go into. And I've seen that. But the problem is that on the flip side, no father in the home, the woman is very protective and serving of her son. And unfortunately, what you tend to find is that and I'll say this to women, you complain about the men you have, that these men today are not strong, these men are this, they're not worth respecting. That those are the comments that are thrown out. But where do you think it comes from? Unprepared boys who are not prepared for the world that they were walking into by men. It takes a man to prepare a boy for the world he's going into, to turn a boy into a man. That process of a boy to a man requires a man to walk you through it. Okay? So that's why I keep saying that this toughness that we need from guys, all right? And I'm talking about it now in the world of managing your wealth, managing your entrepreneurship. Okay, unlike the journeys such as entrepreneurship, and those are tough journeys. Tough. The whole world is telling you to quit. Everyone is telling you you're not going to make it. You are competing. You're getting stabbed in the back. People are robbing you. Okay, that journey is hard as it is. It's really hard. And then on top of that, you're trying to manage a relationship. You're trying to manage a family. Like all these things are compounding together, and you're not allowed to break. That is the truth. You are just not allowed to break. And as much as the world will write stories about how you should break, and every psychologist and everyone will come on air and tell you, you got to speak out, the moment you do, you'll be left. And maybe not that minute, but I'm telling you, down the line, you will be left. Society will get tired. There's only so much of a crying man society can take. They can allow you to cry the first time, the second time, somewhere down the lines, they're going to expect you to stop. They're going to expect you to stop. No matter how tough your life is, eventually they're just going to say enough is enough. I'm telling you this, Vernon, as a man once you cross 29, every excuse you make has expired. It has officially expired. And if you're in your 20s, it's expiring. It's now at that point where it's best before. So every excuse you have in life, I'm telling you right now, best before 19, valid until 29. That's the reality of your life as a guy. So you need someone like that, whether it's a sports coach, whether it's a father, whether it's an uncle. You need somebody who actually loves you and cares for you to push you. That's what you need as a guy. You may think you need to be nurtured and softened, but the world is not going to have those expectations of you. They're just not going to. And I don't see, maybe you're younger, Vernon. Maybe you can talk about that. But do you see a world that is sympathetic to male tears? And I'm talking about from the fact that they're willing, that like from a distance, and everyone is politically correct, they can say it. But do you intimately see a world which is sympathetic to a guy crying every day?
Of course not.
Yeah. And if that's and that's pragmatism. That's reality. Okay. Whatever you want the world to be, that's wonderful for you. That's wonderful in your heart. But deal with the world as it is. Don't deal with the world as you wish it could be. Deal with it as it is. So if you want boys to be able to go out there, and the reason I say this is 75% of entrepreneurs in this country and around the world, you always find that 70 to 80% of business startups are guys. Okay. And it requires the strongest of guys. It requires disciplined guys. It requires resilient guys. Progress, Vernon, and even when you're telling people to make progress in life, you have to be making progress. You sit down and ask any young woman, what are they looking for in a guy? They'll tell you they're looking for a guy who's making progress in life. Okay? They're looking for a guy who's moving forward in life. Right? They're looking for, that's what they'll tell you. But now let's talk about progress, Vernon. What is progress? Progress is a painful situation. You have to break out of your comforts. You have to go beyond where your limits lie. You have to have a father patting you on the chest saying, you've got to push beyond where you are right now. That's progress. Okay. Progress is spending those extra 30 minutes at work making sales calls, getting rejected. That's progress. Okay. Progress is working those extra hours or working those extra hours on weekends on the project you're trying to do, on the new product you're trying to work on. Progress is turning those extra hours of studying. Progress is hitting those extra minutes in the gym. That's progress. You only make progress, Vernon, when you're willing to push past pain. So if you're telling people to soften up on kids that they can, especially boys, you're telling them that. And the same women are growing up and they're telling you that we want guys who are progressive. What do you think is going to start happening? Then when you start saying guys are not marrying, women are not inspired by the guys, where do you think this is coming from, people? Where is this coming from? Absence of fathers, one. Two, when they're there, you're busy telling them, no, don't parent your child too harsh. I'm not saying you should be now abusive to the point where you're now just a bare knuckle brawler with your child. I'm not saying that's what you should do. But every father, if you're doing it out of love, you'll know there's a limit and you know you need to push them past that limit. You know they need to get used to this idea of pushing past their limit because that's where growth comes from. It's pushing past the limit. Okay, and if you're not raising them to do that, then you're pushing them into a world where they're probably going to get rejected a lot. Or they're probably going to, and it's not even just women. I'm not even talking about women. Even guys, Vernon, have got this, like even if your male friend, okay, has been through an experience, depending on the level of severity, after a while, you expect the guy to be like, dude, can you get through this? Okay, or are we going to be sitting here every time? Like, guys, you know, have you ever had, you've had that friend, Vernon, who's in a sad state. And when they pitch up, you're like, oh, Lord, our day is gone now. And you know, there's that whole thing. Our day is gone. So that's the mentality. So let me just read one of the comments here. Get your thoughts, and then we'll move into the conversation about discipline. I don't think we've gotten the full comment here from Somo. I don't know if we can pick it up a bit from one of our back team, but he says, I think from a young age we need to be taught that male and female are not the same. I haven't spent as much time bonding with my father on an emotional level, but he introduced me to the hustle and the reality of life. Of the life will not always smile at you. Men need men to survive as grow. Women and society will use tears and below the belt. Okay, let's not bring that part up. But I thank God that I have connected myself to men, and everywhere they are not ready. Everywhere that they are not ready, as they are also learning to survive and deal with. We didn't get that last part. Sorry, but yes, I think the reality is, look, and I say this again: men need men to help to train them for the world that they're going into. That's why in the Bible it doesn't say nurture your child in the way, it says train them. And Vernon, let's be honest, training it's not an easy thing, people. Training is a hard thing. Training is a tough activity. Okay, whether you're training for anything academic, whether you're training for something physical, training is tough. Training requires pressure. Training requires pain. It requires going to, okay, where's my pain point today, and now saying, okay, if let's put it in push-up terms. If my max set of push-ups I can get to is 20, when my arms start to buckle and my chest starts to sting, I need to push 5 more. Okay, I need to put in 5 more. Then until 25 is where my comfort zone is. Then when 25 is my comfort zone, I need to push 5 more until 30 is my comfort zone. And then when 30 is my comfort zone, I need to push 5 more. And you keep doing that until you can get yourself to the military count of being able to push 60, 100. Like, that's what you need to be able to do. And that's what everything in life is going to demand of you. So that's either that, Vernon, or we're going to have a bunch of guys who every single time they face difficulty, they're going to commit suicide. Okay, we're gonna have a bunch of guys who every time they face difficulties of life, and the difficulties of life are the realities of life, is they're gonna commit suicide. We're grooming boys for suicide. Okay, we're not grooming them for the, because we're hoping the world is going to love them. And I think it was Chris Rock who was saying this. He's saying, he was laughing. He was saying that, and people, I am in no way, shape, or form advocating for bullying, but he said the only people at school who prepare you for life are your bullies. It's like, those are the only people. It's like your teachers don't prepare you for real life. The curriculum doesn't prepare you, but your bullies actually prepare you for exactly what you are going to see out there. Now, I'm not saying you should go through bullying. I'm just saying that you have to. Now, it's either the bullies at school who you don't know, or you're going to have to start saying, I need to press this person to start getting a bit stronger. And that's an act of love. People may not understand that that's an actual act of love. That if your child is not strong enough, what are you going to do? You're sending a weakened child into the world. So this is why the olden days, Vernon, children used to hunt with their fathers. Boys used to hunt with their fathers, because then it was preparing that boy for a family that expected them to hunt with their father. I mean, to be the father hunting. Okay, it prepared them for that. So what are we doing? And I'll tell you who's doing this correctly. You laugh and say, let kids be kids, don't put them in your business, this and that. But when an Indian man when you go to a Lebanese petrol station or an Indian business and you find the son sitting there behind the till, and you think, why is this child working here? In 10 years' time, that's you're busy saying, what, your son is going to be asking that child for a job. In 10 years' time, your son will be asking that child for a job, because this father is training that boy to take over this business, training him, making sure he understands what are books, okay, what are sales, what is inventory, how do I handle my employees, to the point where, have you noticed that even the father can leave that shop and then leave the child in charge? Have you noticed that it even gets to that point where you find the child 16, 17 is now being left in charge of the store? Why? Through that harsh training, where this child, instead of playing afternoon activities all the time, and they do let them play afternoon activities once in a while, but through that harsh training of having to pitch up at the store, at the business, whatever it is, they're being trained. Okay, Rishi Sunak even says he was trained to be a waiter at his parents' restaurant. He worked in his mother's pharmaceutical company. He worked. Okay, they're in the parents' business. Why? They were training him. They were grooming him to actually now start learning how to be that responsible, to the point where eventually Rishi Sunak was able to even start a venture capital company. I think it was a seed capital, venture capital, or private equity company, but he ended up being able to start one, to go from trading desk to be able to start his own business, to be able to go to becoming the first Indian British prime minister. But he was groomed like this. He was trained like this, built like this. Okay. So I think what people don't understand is the process of turning a boy into a man fit for the economic duties that he is expected to execute by society, whether you like it or not. There is an expectation placed on every man in society. You need to prepare him. If you do not prepare him, we are going to be having these sad situations constantly rising in society where we keep asking the question, why are suicides rising in society? We keep asking this question. But the question is, have we had the honest conversation and said, are we preparing our boys for the world that they're going into? Or are we protecting them so much that the day we have to let them go, society and life will shock them so horribly and scare them so badly that eventually they'll have to retreat. And unfortunately, that retreat may not always be a healthy way. But when you're younger, you give your thoughts before we move into discipline.
Right. So, it's interesting though what we generally have turned out to be. And this is something that Dumisani equally put out in his book, The Radical Entrepreneur, where he really is putting in place some of the things that actually has been through. And I was listening actually to his podcast the other day. I think should have been I've forgotten the name of the podcast, but he was on one of his podcasts locally done, and he said, you cannot be where I am today despite having gone through some of the things that actually I have been through, and you will never fight as hard as I can because you don't have the hunger for success or progress or wellness in life, because I have been through a lot, and you who probably grew up in the city, life is way much better as compared to us who are probably, if you want to use numbers, we were somewhere -5 and you are somewhere 1 or somewhere 0. It's very different as compared to the kind of hunger we do have. And you see, I'm not talking about money, but you see, the concept there that I got, the rationale was that, if you haven't been through something, it hasn't molded you enough for you to think in a particular way. And this is why, of course, I suppose you're talking about the bullies in high schools. And I think even in lower secondary schools, we've had these, kind of scenarios of young ones being bullied and whatnot. And moving forward, it's funny how you see the same ones who are bullied doing much better, becoming much, serious fighters in life after being bullied in school. And you see, that particular scenario is always regarded as a bad experience of life, but positively, it molded you into what you are today. And it's given you that fighting spirit in you. And for generally what we are, as young men in society, growing up with the different dynamics today, always the world changing, always trying to throw its narrative on you, its expectations on you, and what you should be, what you should not be, how you should behave, and whatnot. I think all of that is. I think it's irrelevant if it's going to break you and make you weak of a person. And when you are weak, they don't want a weak man in society themselves. I think that is just by confusing in itself. So as a gentleman, you have to look out for yourself. And I tell people this: I do what I think is right for me and not what society thinks is right for me as a young man in society today. The Western world has its own narrative as well. It's got its own story. It's got its own expectations of a young man. Women in particular have what they want to see, and we've got tradition and culture. There's a way they look at a man. There's primarily how we ourselves should also look at ourselves. So if you choose to pick whatever is on the table and go with that and say, well, I'm trying to please the world, I'm trying to please my community, my family, well, there have it, And I was telling people saying, I would rather I spend a whole day at work or trying to do, activities that will actually bring me money, as compared to investing in a relationship that I know a woman will walk away from me and she wants me to spend money on her, and I tell her I'm saving money. She's gonna be upset, and later in future, if I continue spending on the lady, she will say I don't want broke men because I spent all my savings on her, and now she doesn't want to deal with a broke guy. So I'm thinking, if we're going to prioritize other people's needs and wants and necessities before yours as a gentleman, your happiness, your well-being, your mental stability, your financial, freedom, later in future, it's the very same society, the same people. The society comprises of the same women, uncles, coaches, like you mentioned, 5 family members. You talk about the same, and a chimbo. So they're the same people who will still hit you with more expectations. You're supposed to get married. Look at your age. You're supposed to have had a job by now. You're supposed to have had a stable income. But Earlier on, you were telling me this is how I'm supposed to behave as a man, and look at what I have turned out to be today. You're telling me to be soft, you're telling me not to cry, and you see, all of these things can be rather confusing as you're growing up. But ultimately, I have always taught people, find your way and find out who you want to become. It's easier for you to work around some of these things. Some of these things are coming from people who we perceive as role models, but not everything is applicable for you because you understand what you're trying to become. But if you are rather ambiguous, or probably you don't even know who you want to become later in future as a young man, it will be very difficult for you to navigate your way through life because you want to take everything that people say and try to implement it in your life. Be a priest, go. You want to become a business person, go. Be a doctor, you want to do that. So you find that in the long run, it's sad to say that some of these gentlemen actually do not even have a clear direction. Some of them get into marriage because they are told, well, I think at your age you should get married. And it's funny because at the end of the day, you will not have peace, you will not have that genuine happiness. You will be broken, and no one will want to take a broken guy. You will be broke, and no one wants to hang around a broke guy. So initially, and talk about the church itself. It has its own expectations on a man today, and it all trickles down to yourself and the decision that you make finally. People have asked me for advice on a few matters, back and forth, life related and whatnot, and I give them the advantage and the disadvantage, and I let them make the decision. So in any way in future, they don't blame me for having given them a way, but rather I've shown them the badness or the goodness of whatever decision that will probably take. So ultimately, I always tell people, look out for yourself first. Find yourself. Who do you want to become? And whatever people will say, it is easy to pick what will be workable for you and not, and the other way around. So it's easy for you to navigate and, filter what you hear, what you come across, what people throw at you. And ultimately, you need to be strong. I tell people, if you can put in extra 2 hours in your work or in whatever you do at the end of the day, so you can have more money, so you can build yourself in value wise, create more potential for yourself, expose yourself to more information so you can become, more of a valuable person. Do it. Do not say, no, I'm a man, I've worked and whatnot. Do not compare yourself to other people because you understand who you want to become in future. And that should give you a roadmap of how much input you should as well put on the table to attain those things. I will say it is very confusing to be a young man in this time.
Gentlemen, let me tell you one thing. Your wife will not tolerate you complaining about inflation. Okay? Sure, they'll go on social media and they'll say the cost of living is high, but they're going to expect their man to put up here. Let's be candid here. No one is going. And I keep seeing guys talking about the cost of living, everything. Sure, but nobody's going to tolerate you talking about it. They're going to expect you to do something about it. Okay, and you have no political power, but you have personal economic power. So instead of take the energy away from the inflation conversations and away from the complaints, and put that energy into bettering your skill set so that every hour you work is more valuable. Okay, because if you can outpace inflation, you can have less to complain about. That is the key goal here. Everybody has to do, and that's a painful process, Vernon. Now, even when we talk about the conversation about bullying, people, we've been there. I've been there. I was a kid. I was bullied as a kid, not to the extent that certain people have been, but I've had physical bullying and I've had verbal bullying. I've had mental, emotional. I've gone through that. Okay, I gained a huge amount of weight when I was a kid, and I was the point figure of every single joke, comment, this, ire. I went through it. Okay, I went through it. I went through the ringer as a kid. Okay, but I'm telling you this when I and even Dumisani talks about being joked at for being, he calls himself the poor of the poor, and how he was mocked amongst his friends. Now, I will tell you this: in as much as it is a horrible experience to be bullied, and it is, okay, it's an inexcusable thing. It's a very, and should you go out there thinking when you're bullying somebody you're doing them a public service. You are not. Okay, you're an irritant in society, and you will be dealt with somewhere down the line. But the reality, Vernon, is you need to go through those things because they are bullies in workplaces. Okay, they are. Whether you wish they're not there, they are. They are bullies in workplaces. They are bullies in industries. Okay, when you start a business, you are going to find incumbents who are going to use underhanded tactics. You will start a juice business Okay, and I'm telling you, I've heard these comments said before, where someone says, "Hey man, when I see a competitor, I cut my price in half so I can smoke those guys out." What are you gonna do when somebody who's got deep pockets, when somebody who's got the power to actually smoke you out of the industry? What are you gonna do? Cry? It's not gonna work. You can't cry back at them. They'll smoke you out of business. You have to learn to now say, "How do I deal with bullies?" And unfortunately, that's where these tests come from in your youth, in your younger days. And it's up to even parents. Look, and I said it again, it's not a great thing, but the conversation a father will have with a son is, "I got to teach you how to fend these guys off. I've actually got to teach you how to fight back." And I'm not talking about, oh, it's physical. I've got to teach you how to be able to be resilient. You got to teach these kids how to deal with these bullies, because the reality is when they leave school, the bullies are bigger. They've got more money. They've got more power. They can jail you. You got police officers who are bullies. You've got government officials who are bullies. You got politicians who are bullies. You got bankers who are bullies. How many times, Vernon, have I started here and I've talked about how the banking industry bullies the retail bond investor? Okay. And I've had to teach people not to say, "Look, you can whimper about it," or "I can teach you to go out there and fight. Learn how to get your own bond, learn how to get your own piece of paper, send it to the BOZ and pressure your bank to be able to get the bond that you want." Or you can sit on the side and say, "These banks are bullies. These banks are bullies." You can say that if you want. Or you can fight back. Okay, because sometimes you have to learn how to fight back. I'm not saying you fight back all the time, but sometimes you have to learn how to fight back against the bullies. And unfortunately, that is what, even in that small video, that is what he's training him to do. He's training him to fight back. So there are situations, Vernon, where you have to train people how to fight back. And that requires facing an uncomfortable situation. And I've said it before. Okay, so yes, there is a pressure to life, and especially for the guys. You need to understand this, and I've said gone through a breakdown. I've openly talked about this before, that I've gone through a breakdown before. And I know when a guy gets to that point where he's saying, "Let me just exit." Okay, I think let me exit, stage left, I've had it. I've gotten to that point before. Okay. Now, obviously, I won't go into the details, but I've gotten into that point, and I know what that breakdown is. And it's usually one of three things. In fact, it's a combination of usually two of these three things. You've lost your job, okay, because men are more likely to commit suicide on unemployment. You're under financial stress, be it debt, or you're struggling to keep up with bills, and you've been left, okay, either by a girlfriend or your wife. One of these, somewhere in the mix of those three things, you've lost your economic source of income, your finances are deteriorating, and your relationship has broken down. These three things, you often find a guy decides this is the end for him, okay, and he decides to just exit himself. Those three things, those are serious pressure situations. When you interrogate a lot of the outcomes when people become suicidal, they do hit those points a lot. And I know the mental health community will start lashing out and saying, "Well, it's a bit more deeper than that. I'm just giving it to you as simple as it is because I may not have the right credentials to talk about it, but I'll tell you the truth. I think I have some experience in that area, and I can tell you that that's where it comes down to. So it's a combination, and usually a guy gets whacked by about two of those. Okay, he gets whacked by about two of those. His life gets so complicated. And just remember, I'm speaking from this position because 80% of suicides in Zambia are men. Okay, 80% of them are men, right? 80% of the alcohol consumption in this country is men. And I'm telling you, that ain't coming from a happy place. That's coming from a stressed place. Men are drinking 80% of the alcohol in this country, and they're taking their lives, and they're conducting 80% of the suicides in this country. When you go to a rehabilitation center, it's packed full of men. When you're sitting in a prison, it's packed full of men. This is pressure showing, okay? This is pressure from men being unprepared for life. They're not being prepared for the world that they're going into. It's an ever-changing world with greater expectations, with rising prices, with the need to learn to be more financially literate, with a tougher entrepreneurial environment, okay? With a job market where there isn't a job waiting for you the moment you finish grade 12. That is not the world these boys are walking into. and you have to prep them for that. You have to be honest with them. You can't tell them that the moment they finish school, they're going to walk out there and they're going to find that the world has already found jobs for them. When you start telling a young man that, back in our days, we finished grade 12 and we just had jobs waiting for us. When you start telling these guys that, and you're building these unrealistic expectations that they're going to walk into the job market and find jobs just waiting for them out there, you're building a very bad situation here. Those guys they're going to be heartbroken when they come to the realization that there is no job sitting there waiting for them. You haven't prepared them for the fact that they need to learn to be self-employed. They're going to need to learn to potentially start a business. Are you training them entrepreneurially for the world they're going into? And by the way, regardless of how bad the job market is, the expectations in marital life are still the same. Okay. And people, I know, look, we've had these conversations as guys. Oh, the modern woman can take care of herself, all this stuff. Hey, bruh, everyone's a feminist until they get married. All right. The day they get married, all of a sudden you're the man of the house. There's the expectation. It comes on to you. You're the man. You're the one who's supposed to provide. Their kids come into the picture because remember, a woman goes through a state of vulnerability, physical vulnerability when she has a child. She's expecting a guy to now start saying these things. Okay, so this is what we mean when we say we need to prepare, and I know that word is not; those words are not understood. That's why teaching men to become disciplined, okay, teaching men to become focused, teaching them to be disciplined. This is why I'm very concerned, Vernon, about the deterioration of after-school sports. I'm actually very concerned with the lack of boys playing afternoon sports. Because the one thing I remember afternoon sports used to do, I think every boy should have an afternoon sport. You know why? And I remember at schools, they used to tell you it's compulsory. You know why that stuff used to be compulsory, Vernon? It's not because they expect you to become a football player or superstar. No, a sport gives you a sense of discipline. It teaches you how to work in a team. It teaches you camaraderie. They are lessons. Those skills are so important in entrepreneurship. They're so important in work. In your work life, learning how to work in a team is important. Learning to say, I have to be at practice at this time or else I run laps. That is an important part of your life. If you can do that when you're a child in sport, then you can start to transfer that. Sports build character in children. I remember in the movie Coach Carter, he says, you will not become excellent basketball players, but you will become excellent men. Okay, and that's an important part. That's why I said sports coaches are very critical to young men. Very critical, because a lot of character is built on the sports field. Young men are very well groomed in the sports field because of character. And yes, they don't have to be good at that sport, but there's character that's built in there. But we're getting them away. And it's globally, by the way. Globally, we're seeing a deterioration away from after school sports. When every parent, by the way, used to tell you that our parents all used to play after school sports. Vernon, today, how many kids are playing after school sports?
Very few.
Yeah. So there's no and the thing about it is that discipline that they get from that prepares them for the work world they have to go into. Because they'll tell you, because I was disciplined in judo or soccer or basketball or whatever, because of that discipline of going to practice at least 2 to 3 times a week, when at work I'm told practice your skill 2 to 3 times a week, it's normal for me. This has become a character now. It's become who I am. And that's what those physical disciplines do. They give you the character of discipline, so now you can take that discipline into your work. Withholding yourself, Vernon, from eating certain food. The coach will tell you, guys, I don't want to see you eating junk food at the school cafeteria or at home. I don't want to hear you eating junk food. You've got a game. You need to be in shape. So you start controlling what you're eating for your sports match. What do you think that teaches you? To withhold gratification. It teaches you to start focusing and not just taking anything that gives you pleasure instantly. That teaches you spending habits. That teaches you physical control. That teaches you health control. So whenever you're now looking into your real life, where do you think that starts to pan out? The greatest lessons in my life came from the sports field. Okay? Yes, they strayed away in my life, but the greatest lessons in my life came from the times I used to play rugby, times I used to play cricket. On the sports field is where I learned a lot about character building. And the moment you start taking sports out of school, even in the education system, you are not I honestly think, and I remember in Vusi Temekwaya's conversation at the Activate conference, he said, your character is the foundation of your talent. So for you to actually be able to see the fruits of your talent, your character forms that foundation. So if you're stripping away the character development of extracurricular activities from school, they are so important. Recreational and extracurricular activities, competitive sports. When you're telling boys we don't keep score on the football field, what on earth are you doing? You're not training them for life. Life keeps score. Okay. That is the reality. Life keeps score. An income statement for your business is a giant scoreboard. Okay. And you're going to have to make a profit. And if you're being told we don't keep score in soccer, you know what, people, you're training this kid to think they can run a business without keeping an income statement. They need a discipline of seeing what the scoreboard is doing, for seeing what their actions are doing. So I personally do think that even the sports field needs to be brought back. But yes, it does. So I'm going to try and read some of the comments here as we close out. But then I'll give you the final say here. I know this one has been a deep men's I think we've had a little mini men's conference today. From all of this about preparing guys for the economic realities. Someone says Pastor Robert Burrell has a program aimed at mentoring men. I think we need such programs for our young men. I'm not where I want to be. I'm a product of tough situations I've faced growing up. We can teach men to use the battles as energy. I think the battles. So yeah, sorry, the battles as energy and force, and the force to power their hunger and ambition. I think it's true. Being able to turn your adversity into power. That is correct. Mr. Jonathan Ambili has written, the school system has also changed. Most schools keep children for a whole day, but don't provide sporting activities. And that's true. By the way, kids are at school the whole day. Us, we used to knock off 12 and they'll tell you, hey, better see you on the sports field. You're allowed one cultural activity, one sports activity. Preferably, we want to see you playing two. Okay, and the ability, Vernon, to work in teams and to be disciplined, like what sports gives you of teams plus discipline. That's some hard stuff. Okay. It's either you get it from sports or you get it from the military. Take your pick. And you know, Vernon, by the way, statistically speaking, military people are more likely to be successfully self-employed or start businesses. Former military people are actually more likely, and it comes from the fact that they're trained to make hard decisions under terrifying circumstances. So they're decisive and they're disciplined. Military people are trained to be disciplined, decisive. They're trained to work in units. They're trained to work with physical technology. So the latest in guns and weapons, they're trained to work with that. So that training that they get, when you put a military person into a business environment, that discipline that they get, that team capability they get, the decisiveness that they have, of being able to make snap decisions in a battlefield. They see life as a battlefield. So they're able to see business as a battlefield. They're able to see finance as a battlefield. So they're able to have a lot more successful outcomes because of that. Statistically speaking, you can see it from the outcomes of military people. Countries that have forced their kids to go into the military, as tough as that was, Israel produces one of the biggest entrepreneurial rates. And as a result, an 18 to 21-year-old boy in Israel is forced to go into the military. Okay, and that's part of it. When you look at the conscription rates you find in countries like North Korea has a high entrepreneurship rate. They've got forced conscription. You have to go for military training. When you go to Brazil, they've got forced military training. China has got a lot of people in the military as well. In South Africa, the Afrikaans men, those Boers that we talk about and say, how come they start businesses in any circumstance? Well, the Afrikaans government used to force every boy to go to the military. So we had it here when we had national service, just that we didn't have a free market economy. It's a tough thing, by the way, and those are painful things to go through. Anyway, Vernon, I'll leave you with the final say before we rush off today. I know we've had a very strong conversation. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us in today's conversation. But Vernon, what are your thoughts before we sign off?
I think choosing to be practical is a personal decision and not what the society or people around you should choose for you. You know, be it financial matters, be it personal matters, be it emotional, situations, be it it's a time you need to take a step and visit the lady you are seeing's family. It's entirely your decision you need to take. and you need to be very decisive. You know, one thing that I always tell people is even when you're wrong, your confidence will tell, and people will not even notice that you're wrong about what you're doing or what you're saying. So pretending to be confident is the very first step of building your confidence. And so believe in yourself. Believe, I mean, if what do you call it? There's a saying at Kuala Lumpur and whatnot. That one is essentially, describing people who are not grounded on something, and so whatever comes around, they'll go with it. So, like I said, find yourself, know what you want to become, and be grounded on that. Believe on that. I've got principles that I have laid down for myself, still revising some, and of course, still working on a few. But that it should give you perspective. I think something I enjoyed in my media journey from inception was that I knew the industry I wanted to be in. I have seen some of my supervisors after years of supervising you. They're like, I think media is not my thing. I haven't really found out what I want to do. Something I've appreciated myself is that I have been decisive from inception, and that has given me a lot of ground and momentum to really build myself. So in everything you do, always be decisive. Know what you want and fight for that and push towards that and invest in it. As a man, there's a lot, of course, you have to deal with, but there is no way or justifiable reason that you should end your life. We have thought about it, and here we are still. But you just got to be strong, keep pushing, and invest in yourself. Everyone will want to be like a gentleman of your character if you invest yourself well. My thoughts.
That is true. And thank you very much to everyone who's joined us. Answer the question. For those of you who may want to ask the question, please continue. Thank you so much for joining us. Tag a friend of yours if you want to have them in this conversation. And join us tomorrow as we're going to be discussing, we're going to be back into the deep dives. We're going to be back on the data, and we'll be discussing life insurance on the other side. Ironically, life insurance. To everyone, have a wonderful day and God bless.